It's 6:03. We'll open up the public hearing. This will be the second public hearing for the millage rate. We had some discussion in the last meeting. I think most everybody was in here, maybe except for Ms. Gasaway. And just to maybe kind of catch everybody up, if you wasn't, what we're trying to do is, you know, we didn't roll back our millage rate this year. We decided to accept the growth, I believe is what it's called. And hopefully we can take that money and put it towards some departments. You know, we in a time where it's so hard to go out and get people to come to work for us, our focus then becomes, you know, to the retention of the employees that we have. And we hope that this will help us in those efforts, and maybe even, you know, get some people to look at us a little bit different to come to work for us. But it's not just us, it's, you know, it's everywhere. You just can't find anybody to work anymore. And that's the sad part about it. So, yeah, Commissioner Patterson, you got anything before we open it up?
No, I kind of agree with you. We talked about it last time, and we just need to kind of have an incentive for them to get newer people. I think the people we've got are hanging in there tough. We haven't had a lot of people just drop out, but we're growing so much that we're going to have to increase the workforce, and hopefully this is the way to do so.
Yeah. Well, that's our goal. I know nobody ever likes to hear the word increased taxes. I know it is that's a sore subject for a lot of folks, and I understand that wholeheartedly. But at the same time, when you look at, when I look at it, I can't speak for everybody. When I look at how far we are behind in our infrastructure, you know, 28 years ago, actually I worked for the sheriff's office as a detention officer, jailer, what we used to call it back in the day. And we had 2 full road deputies and 1 jailer. And I think 28 years later, we have 3 road deputies per shift and maybe 3 jailers. Yeah, 2, 3. So with the growth from 28 years ago till now, I mean, it just kind of gives you an idea how far we are behind in that one department. So our hopes is that we can increase our workforce and catch up to what's past us.
You know, I've seen you know, cars, police cars especially, they say about protecting and serving. We've got to serve our people here, whether the road department, police department, the EMA, or whatever, and we're just growing to the extent, especially doubling, I think, our paper on the weekends. We've got to be able, you know, I feel like one of our biggest job is to protect and serve our people here in Fannin County. Not just the tourists that come in, which is okay, but also the people that are moving here, making their homes here. It's just growth. And, we need to be aware of that in the infrastructure, and you know, try to stay a little bit above the curve, you know, beyond the curve. Sometimes it's hard to do, but if you don't, you get in trouble.
All right. We'll take this time and open it up to anybody who wants to come and speak. Want everybody jump at one? Is there anybody, any comments for or against, regardless? Can't speak his own, I think one of your last time. You got anything?
I have no comment. I just
Okay.
see what was going on.
I just wanted to hear from somebody. Mr. Harmson.
I've already written what I got to say.
Well,
What did you say you call this growth, keeping the growth rate? What do you say it's keeping the millage rate the same?
yeah, well, you're accepting the growth is what you're doing.
Accepting the growth, yeah.
Accepting the money from the growth, and instead of rolling the millage rate back. And I think just to kind of give an idea, it went from 3 point.
Yeah, let's get specifics, yeah,
Yeah.
what was it?
I think we were at 3.840, and that takes it to 3.862. Like I said, so,
It's not a tremendous amount, but it's some.
it's some. And there again, it's, you know, it's not going in there and changing it from 3.84 to 5.25. We're, you know,
Right.
we're not trying to do that at all.
I have a comment about growth. In my office, I have 3 new subdivisions with 300-something acres of development going on. So eventually, my department, land development, is gonna have another person, because one person, I can't look at all of that that's going on.
Sure. Good point.
That's 3 new developments that I've got this year.
How big are they, you know?
One of them's over 200 acres. The other one's 51, 50, 55, or something like that. So it's about 326 acres, I believe, what I calculated it. There's several new homes.
Yeah.
You sure you can't handle
Yeah, I have, but
it?
There was an article.
depends, it depends.
There was an article last night, I can't remember if it was in AJC or what it was in, but it ranked the lakes, the most expensive lakes in Georgia. Well, what guess is who's number 1? And, said the average home sale on Blue Ridge Lake for the past year was at 1.19. And the most expensive home sale on Blue Ridge Lake was in, May 21st, $5,119,000.
Whoa.
So we now exceed Burton, Chattooga. As it was us, then Burton, then Chattooga, then Lake Oconee, and then something called Kewaunee and Peachtree City, which I'm trying to think, that must be a man-made lake about the size of Notley.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, not Notley, Vogel, but every, you know, it's just, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it is.
We did a closing, and in 33 years, I've never done this. We had a contract come in, and it was up in, is this my mountain or Mountain Tops? What is this over here?
Mountain Tops.
In Mountain Tops, it was for $2 million. And I was like, there's no home in Mountain Tops that's selling for $2 million, cash. And I told Harry, I said, I'm not getting involved in drug money. And so one day at lunch, I just decided I was gonna go put eyes on it. I was going to make sure that that place physically existed. Never done that. It was sitting right there. And then I ran into somebody in the courthouse, and I just happened to talk about my excursion, and they said, oh, I know that person. Said you can watch the infomercials between 3 and 5 in the morning, and she has, it's called Beach Bodies or something, but she's the person that does that infomercial. And that was
Well, I can honestly say I haven't seen that one.
If I did, I wouldn't
Try.
say anything about it.
Maybe you have, and you just don't want to realize it. That you have seen the ladies that are practicing for beach bodies.
Trying to show off my Coke bottle figure, but it went from a 8-ounce to a 3-liter.
That was a good one.
That was. Here all week, y'all. Come back and see it. All right, anybody got anything else on the millage rate?
You got anything, Kevin?
All right, well, I'll, do we have to make a motion to close the public hearing, right? I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for the second public hearing for the millage rate.
Second the motion.
All in favor? 31, and we'll open the public hearing on the tiny home subdivisions. We're gonna ask Keith Nicholson if he would come up here and kind of give us a little tutorial on it, if you will.
Jamie, would you mind
Yeah.
just telling everybody what the current status is right now?
Current status is there's a moratorium on this, and it has been going on since, from my knowledge, since 2018. When the tiny home subdivisions first started coming out, and I apologize,
Yeah.
when it first started coming about tiny homes, there was a lot of unknowns in that time. Still a lot of unknowns now. I think it's a little bit clearer, but just a lot of unknowns. You had some more people were against it, I think, than were for it. So we thought we would try to open it back up, allow more people to come back in. We may have to have another one after this. You know, we had some inclement weather there, but we may have another one before we lift a moratorium, or make a decision to lift the moratorium and move forward. So that's kind of where we're at on that. It was brought up, you know, I think it was for our first meeting in July. There was still some unknowns about it, and we decided to put it off until we could have a public hearing, and that way we could try to find out a little bit more about it ourselves. And so here we are. And hopefully we have some folks that are here for both sides, for and against it. I'd like to hear the fours and the pros and the cons, because realistically, I'm not 100% on it myself. So the more input we have, the better, moving forward, the better decisions that we can make to try to benefit our county. So, have anything?
No, I agree. I just wanted you to let everybody know what the current status was right now.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman, can I correct that date? Also, it was actually in 2019.
19.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And it's over, what's the last, end of this month? Is that right?
It actually, yeah, it'll be the end of August. Our last meeting next Tuesday is when we'll make a decision either to move forward one way or another, or put it back on a moratorium.
Right.
So,
All right, I'm good.
all right.
Lynn?
Thanks, Jerry.
All right.
Okay, just so everybody can understand, know what we're talking about, keep everybody on the same page. A tiny home, as defined by the state of Georgia, as defined by the International Code Congress, is 400 square feet or less. And they've even come up with what we call Appendix Q in the code book. If you're building 400 square feet or less, you have a different set of codes you can go by to build this tiny home. If it's 401 square feet, you've got to meet the codes of a regular house. Just bringing some ins and outs of the whole situation. And like I say, I'm not playing devil's advocate or not for or against on this. Just a lot of people will tell you that, well, my grandparents, they were brought up 12 kids in a house that big. Well, at that time, you didn't have a laundry room with washer and dryer. You didn't have the bathroom. You had an outhouse and everything. You didn't have a full-blown kitchen. A lot of times you were cooking over the stove right there, fireplace. So a lot of things have changed in these homes. It's not as easy to live in something that small. One other thing that in the International Building Code, and I've got it here on a piece of paper here and highlighted. A lot of people are thinking they can build these tiny homes and rent them out, put a fold-out couch in it, there's a bed there in the back, and it's actually got another pull-out underneath it. We'll sleep 6 people in this. You need 200 square feet per person for a residential house. So if you're building a tiny home, you got to have 400 square feet for 2 people. Anything less, one person's all you're supposed to have in that house. So I'm just trying to let people know some ins and outs here. Anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer anything I can.
What's the density per acre they anticipate?
Okay, just my thinking on it, I'll put it this way, a lot of this is up to the commissioners to decide. Just because you're doing a tiny home, we're not gonna change the lot size. Not planning on it. You still have to have so much land to put in a septic tank and an individual well on private property. Typically, depending on your soil samples, that's anywhere from 1.25 acres up to 1.5 acres. And then later on, it's some of these tiny homes, I mean, they sound like they're a great deal. You can build them a little cheaper than a normal home, but you look at it, price per square foot, these tiny homes cost more per square foot than a normal house.
What I was thinking of is everybody has seen these, trailer house villages that
Yeah.
they're not as popular as they used to be, but they would squash 10 or 12 pretty good sized trailers on an acre.
Yeah, there you would have to have city water, city sewer.
Yeah, but
Now, if you got those, then you can get by with less property.
because I don't know of anybody that wants to see, one after another,
No.
kernels of corn on an ear.
So did I understand that correctly? If you have a house on your property that has a septic tank and a well, you need to have an individual one for any additional tiny house on your land?
Yes.
Okay. So it can't be shared?
Can't be shared septic.
No septic can be shared. Well could possibly be shared,
Yes.
but not septic.
Okay.
Now, I'll put it this way now. Most of the time, if you're going through a bank having to get a loan, the bank's not going to put out that loan if you've got a shared well.
Well, we have a lot of subdivisions here that have shared wells.
Okay, now there's a difference there. A lot of those are what we call EPD wells. They have already been they're tested every month to make sure that the water's good.
Right.
And it's not considered a shared well so much as it is public water at that point.
Well, real estate listing that showed it's a shared well. And I'm in real estate and we promote it as a shared well. So everybody understands what a shared well is. And so, yes, I lived in a subdivision over off of Maxwell Last Resort that was on shared wells. And yes, we had to test it every month.
Yes.
But to say that you can't do it is not correct. You can do it.
I say that is still, it's a difference in a shared well for a subdivision that's put in for that sole purpose.
But we're talking about tiny home subdivisions.
Well, there's a difference, and I think that's one of the things we all have, the commissioners have to decide, is we're a non-zone county. We basically do not, we have limited areas where we have septic. So if I own a piece of property, can I put a tiny home on my piece of property? That's one consideration, because if I'm putting it on my property, when it's all said and done, I still have to meet the health department requirements for septic. The other thing is, and I think it was part of the reason that we went to the moratorium, was because we don't have zoning, and the closest ordinance we had at that point in time was our provisions for an RV type park. And what you had to have an RV park. So does the county want to enact an ordinance that would say a tiny home community, which would be one or more tiny homes, or maybe it is 2 or more tiny homes, whatever the number of the commission, then what are the standards for those? Partly because, like what this gentleman was saying, and I remember at that point in time, it was Commissioner Johnson, saying, if I've spent my money and I've built a $750,000 house, do I necessarily want there to be a community? And I've got mine on 2 acres, do I want there to be a community of tiny homes, whether or not that's 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever it is, right next to me on 2 acres of land? Or do I want to say it's at a minimum, what's our RV park, Marie, 10 acres?
10 acres.
Yeah, so I want to treat it like we have done RV parks, which is 10 acres of land. And it has to have certain buffers around it. You have to have certain things for septic. Like I think the closest thing that we have, is the community at the intersection of Lakewood, of Loving Road and 575. Yeah, 515 at that one. And they have City of Morganton water, but their septic tank, their septic system, their on-site sewage.
They have DNR approved wells, Lynn.
They have DNR approved wells, okay. And then they had to get their septic approved by,
Department of Natural Resources, Georgia EPD.
yeah.
A shared septic.
It's a shared septic, but it was nothing that we could approve locally.
State of Georgia approved.
State of Georgia had to come up and say.
So that can still be done now.
It could be, but,
I mean, there's no law in the county that can stop that.
well, right now there's a moratorium on it. So if the moratorium expired, then the answer to the question would be, there would not be. And that's part of the reason for having the consideration now, is what is the best vehicle for the county going forward? And there's 2 different considerations. What you and I that own 1 lot, and basically now, as Keith said, we gotta have somewhere between 1.25 acres plus to get septic and what well.
What about self-contained tiny houses? A lot of people, they do composting toilets and they don't have running water inside. What's the rules on that?
Right now, those are not allowed. If the moratorium expires, that could happen. So one of the questions for the commissioners to decide is, if I'm allowing tiny home communities or a tiny home subdivision, what's the requirement? Can it be a community that everything is composted toward? Or is it a community that it has to be this many acres and it has to have a DNR approved water system or a municipal water system? It has to have X kind of sewer. Because we all know that one of the most valuable resources we have is water. And so, you know, what do we want to have as far as safety?
Does anybody know if there is some sort of a nation model that we could take a look at and then perhaps adopt or not? But there's bound to be tiny house subdivisions in other parts of the country. And it seems to me we could probably benefit from the problems that some of those people had to overcome and the solutions that they discovered.
They've got them in Millage.
Is a tiny home considered a permanent structure though, because they build on, a lot of them's built on like 6x6s and such as that to be moved?
You can still build on posts. I mean, just look at Florida down there, the hurricanes flooding, they all built on posts.
But I mean, there's a lot of these that's being delivered out like the tiny homes, they're just being delivered and set down on the ground or on blocks. Is that considered a permanent structure, or is that?
It can be, because, yeah, they're hooked into a septic system, to water, to power on them.
Because the reason I was asking that's because there's a whole lot difference between that and a 30-foot fifth wheel, other than,
Yeah.
I mean, still gotta have a big truck to move both.
Yeah.
And that KOA down here next to the university, but North Georgia, there's a big camper place in down there off side 515.
Well, now, anything.
What is that? I mean, is it city sewer on that, or how's that set up?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay.
And water.
Okay.
anything that's on wheels, these tiny homes are what they're calling, or park models, look like a mobile home, just, they're still considered a recreational vehicle, an RV.
I know, and that's, to me, the terminology has advanced to the point to where most people consider a tiny home has wheels. Okay, that's the general conception in the world, that tiny homes have wheels.
Well, that's why I'm up here trying to.
Right, and I think
Everybody
we have to get to the point to where we're discussing this so that everybody understands the terminology and the definitions.
Yeah.
Because you can go out and buy manufactured modular homes now, cheaper than you can build a house from stick. They're built in a factory, out of the weather. You bring them in modular and you set them down. You can design any kind of house you want, how big you want it. They're building apartment complexes out of modular manufactured homes. Part of the problem with manufactured homes is, like you said, they're considered a motor vehicle until you get that title dead,
Yeah.
and then come to the county and get it taken care of.
Take the wheels off.
Right, put it on the foundation. So, if I've got some folks that are looking at, that own 45, 50 acres. Okay? They've already come to the county and they said that, my guys say that they've already been approved to cut the lots down to 3/4 of an acre versus an acre. Okay, I don't know if that's true, I haven't seen the paperwork. But somebody's been talking to them at the county. So, what they're talking about doing is building a tiny home community. And I don't really call it a tiny home community, but more like a resort type place where there's small homes, and they would be short-term rentals, okay? But 40-something acres, they're not around anybody. They're not devaluing somebody's 700,000 square foot, $700,000 house. They're out in the woods. Conservation trails, community lodge, spa, game room. And these people come and rent these small houses, and you can have them made. There's a place up in Bryson City that makes modular houses right now. I know a guy that on Lake Pontchartrain's built a whole RV resort off of modular buildings down on Lake Pontchartrain.
Now, you're not talking about glamping, are you?
No. I'm talking about small buildings that'll sleep 4, maybe with a loft up there for the kids. They come in, it's already, if you go and look at a website called guest.home.
Guest.
Guest.home. These 2 boys from Harvard Business School came up with this idea back in 17 or 18 to help people that are locked down in cities and stuff to get out into nature. They're hitting major cities around the United States. So if you go to Guest.home and punch in Atlanta, it's going to pop up like 3 or 4 different locations within an hour and a half of Atlanta. 2 of them are in Chattanooga. And they're these complexes with 20, 24 small buildings. And people go up there and they rent these things, and they try to put them in places where there's not even cell service. Because they even have a safe in the cabin that people lock their cell phones up. So they get away and escape. And I would love to be a part of this development. I mean, I'm here at this meeting today because this is exactly what affects us. And the other thing is, on these modular homes, if you go in and set one down, are y'all going to approve it if it's already, in other words, if they're meeting all the standards at the manufacturing plant? Because I understand that one of the reasons some municipalities and counties don't like tiny homes is because they don't know where they were built, they don't know what's behind the walls. They don't know what the electrical is, they don't know what the plumbing is. And so they're not getting approved in some communities because the governing body doesn't understand how they're being built. And so they won't approve them for fire and safety and all that kind of stuff. So how does that affect us if it was a manufactured type home?
So like the place up in Bryson City, for instance.
Yeah.
So let's say you expect one out at 400 square foot or whatever, okay? Can they give you all the codes,
Yeah.
or all the specs as far as wiring and everything that has to be done?
They've got a certification. They've got a certification.
Like you're talking about.
Yeah, they've got a
So they can tell
certification
everything.
that they put on it. But would we approve it? Because you got ordinances already on the books for manufactured homes that drop, are towed into here and they have to meet certain.
Certain criteria they would have to meet, like a regular mobile home has to have what we call a HUD sticker on it.
Right.
These tiny homes or park models.
Or modular homes, which you're not seeing here yet.
They're not, they don't have the HUD sticker.
They do now, some of them.
The HUD sticker, you have to be 600 square feet or more to get the HUD sticker on it. Anything else smaller, a lot of these park models have what we call a DCA designation. And a lot of times, Department of Community Affairs have inspected those.
So are they legal here?
Yes,
Okay.
if they've got that.
Well, they would be if there wasn't otherwise a moratorium.
Well, okay, I'm assuming that the moratorium's gonna go away, because the whole purpose of this, I think of this meeting is to try to get to a point to where we could lift the moratorium and have some type of livable ordinance. You got it?
If you look in the parking lot of Home Depot, they've got some buildings called tough sheds. And everybody drives by it every day and sees them. What would prevent me or you or anybody from buying a 400 square foot tough shed? They'll erect it on your property, throw some sheetrock on the inside and say, I've got a tiny home.
They do not meet code a lot of the times.
Then how come Home Depot is selling them?
They're not selling them as tiny homes, they're selling them for sheds.
If you look at some of them, they are absolutely guaranteed, look like a residence.
They look like that, but they don't have double pane windows. They don't have, you gotta put the proper insulation in it, the wiring. The windows have to have the proper size for egress.
I understand that, but if we open up these floodgates,
Yeah.
Home Depot's gonna have a bonanza.
So can those be changed even on a tough shed? Because I was looking at that little double-story blue house there at Home Depot. And,
They can be.
okay,
it
so
can
just
be.
change the windows out and,
As long as it will meet the residential code, we don't have a problem with it. The problem is what we're dealing with right now. If you've got private land, it's no problem to go set you up one of these houses and build it to code. To do the modular home or park model, we're not griping about that at all. Nobody's kicking that. It's just the subdivision. And I'll tell you a lot of what's going on. Now, I'm just telling you what a lot of the fears are in the county. They're going to turn into like a trailer park. Now, if you've got the right regulations and the right people over it, there's a trailer park down in McCaysville.
But if you've got 45 acres and you put 24 of these small homes, and I'm not calling them tiny homes, small homes, whether they're built in Bryson City or somewhere else in the United States, and they're dropped in there on a planned community, high end. And each one of those is sitting on at least 3/4 of an acre. They're on a shared approved well. They're on a shared approved septic system. And they're in the middle of the woods. What's wrong? I mean, that's not a floodgate of tiny homes. That's somebody creating a community where he can rent them out.
My problem is who's responsible for this septic system and this water system?
Who's Whispering Waters or whatever that is?
Who's responsible? Is that the owners of the tiny home? Is it like a utility district? In Texas, they have what they call utility districts and
No,
full
ma'am,
ponds.
it's not a utility district. It has to meet, state of Georgia sets forth the requirements, and then you have to have, like, for a private water system, you have to have a licensed water operator. For a septic system, you have to have a private septic system operator, and those people
certified by the state. And
And they're paid by,
they would be paid by the.
By the subdivision, like Appalachian, like,
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Is it going to be the
No, they're
burden of
not
the
county
taxpayer
No.
in
It's
Fannin
not a
County,
county
or is it
employee.
going
like,
to?
one of the biggest ones here is Appalachian Water. They manage multiple subdivisions here in this county, their water systems, in subdivisions.
Okay,
So they drill multiple wells, however many it takes in the subdivision. And then Appalachian Water maintains the pipes. System runs their own water system down in Cherry Lake.
my point is who's paying for it?
They are the individuals, the people that live there.
People that live there,
Yeah.
each individual.
Right.
So it's like floating a bond, except that they're being billed.
Take like Cherry Lake, each person down there pays, I don't know, 40 something, everybody pays a flat
So the
fee.
developer pays Appalachian Water, and then he recovers, does he recover?
Yeah,
From how does he recover?
from the monthly water bills.
He charges the water bill to the monthly
There's
tenant.
over 500 cabins down in the system down
Now,
there.
but use of water and building a well is two separate things.
Huh?
I'm gonna build a well, it's gonna cost me a money.
That's what the developer does.
Okay, so what do you do, a portion, part then of the water bill of use for a certain recap of the money that you spent to do the well?
No, ma'am, not necessarily. They sell the lots and they probably add the cost of the well into the lots when they sell the lots. And then monthly, they charge each resident a $45, $50
No matter how much water
bill.
you use.
Some people do, some charge for the use of water, so it's a monthly bill.
Okay, so it's going to be recapped when the
But
resale
it's
of the
not gonna
property.
be, yes, ma'am, it's not gonna be for the people to pay for, the citizens. So, right now, we do have an RV ordinance in place for people to put tiny homes or RVs on lots for sale. It has to be 10 acres, and it is DNR approved water source or city water source. And they have to have a DNR septic system. The county health department does not approve those septic systems. It would be my suggestion, if the board decided to do a tiny home community, that they would do at least 10 acres or more for each one of them. They would be required to have the DNR, state of Georgia, water system, or a county or city water system that's already approved by Georgia Department of Natural Resources. And that the septic system would be, if it's a central septic system, that it would have to be a DNR approved, Georgia Department of Natural Resources approved system also. That would be my suggestion. If y'all decide to do this, you might want to think about, because of the $700 home next door, as Mr. Johnson had said previously, that you have a buffer around it, so that no one, they're not gonna be able to be seen. There's a 100-foot buffer around the whole perimeter of these tiny homes. That might be one way to fix the problem with a tiny home community. But there again, we're talking about a tiny home community, rental community, not a for sale lot community, because we do already have an ordinance in place that takes care of that situation.
But I also think that along with her suggestions, that if you can't just imagine the fact that somebody's gonna put as many of these on 10 acres or less, or 10 acres or more.
No, sir.
In the
Yeah.
case that I'm talking about, we're talking about putting buildings on 3/4 of an acre, possibly each one of us having their own septic system with a shared well.
And we need to figure
Well,
out that 3/4 of an acre, because
Okay, so
I haven't heard that.
The
No, I'm
only-
saying,
I'm just, you were saying some of your guys had said they heard
they
that.
talk to the county,
Yeah.
that's what they
I'm
said.
not
That,
sure
I don't know
who
who
they
they talked to.
I don't need,
So it wasn't me. Just so you know, I'm land development, it wasn't.
you're Marie,
I'm Marie. So.
we've talked before.
I would say that if it's 3/4 of an acre, that they have to have a DNR approved well, and or they have to have city or county water. That would be the only way the health department would allow it in any situation if it's just my house out here.
On 3/4 of an acre.
Yes, sir. What we suggest to people is 1 1/3 to 1.5 acres if they call land development, because it takes that to get a well and a septic, because the septic field lines have to be 100 foot away from the drinking water source. So you have to have at least that, based on soils and terrains. Some places may have to have 2 acres. Some may have to have 2.5 if it's on the side of a mountain, because that's just the way it is. But the health department plays a role in whether they can get a well and septic on a lot. So if they don't have city water, they can't go down as low as 0.75.
I just think that using the terminology tiny home subdivision is not beneficial to anybody. If you're talking about a small home community, which that's what these are, they're not tiny homes, because tiny homes have wheels. And if you're talking about a place, if you're gonna write an ordinance, you're gonna have to cover your basis for the fact that if somebody comes in with 40 or 45 acres and wanna put them spread out so that people have privacy inside this community, that's not the same thing as taking and putting 20 on 10 acres.
Okay, that is your definition of a tiny home that has wheels. That is not according to the ICC. You can stick frame, you can pour you a foundation and build a good house.
I know I believe exactly what you did, and I've done a lot of research on this, but my point is that when you're writing an ordinance and you're trying to get public, and you're trying to educate the public, and you're using a term that most people look at tiny homes with wheels on it, they're gonna have a negative connotation of it.
I had a gentleman who is trying to, also, he's in favor of it, but he says, hey, this tiny home, it's the thing. Tiny home, not
necessarily
small,
tiny homes with wheels.
But this is exactly what he said. We need to jump on this, because this is tiny home is the thing. So I mean,
Fad.
Yeah, it's a fad, and I tell you my concerns with it, and I'll just be straight up with you. My concerns is, we just talked about public safety and public works, and we're short in all aspects. I listened to that scanner, and our EMS guys, I mean, they're constantly. We had one crew the other day was 10 hours on one call, 10 hours. They had to drive a patient to a different hospital, because obviously there's no rooms here, but they were 10 hours waiting on a bed. When they got back, it was their rotation again, and bam, there they went again. And my point is this: I'm all about, if it's going to benefit somebody, so be it. But I'm also looking at the impact it's going to have on this county as far as public safety, public works. Because now here we look at the traffic, and I know everybody says, well, the taxes come in, we'll take care of that. If you look at the breakdown on those taxes, it's not what you think.
But what are you saying, that, you mean, don't allow another subdivision?
I'm not saying not allow, I'm just telling you my concerns on it as a citizen.
Well, I know, but there's builders out there building subdivisions right now. Davey
Are
Hayes
they-
starting a new one right down there on Stanley Creek Road right now.
Are they building 50 tiny homes on 40 acres?
No, but they're
I'm
building
just saying.
they're building $500,000 homes, so
And
what's
that
the
has an
difference?
impact with us as well.
So what's the difference?
I mean, I see what you're saying, and it's just an issue regarding.
There's actually more people in those $500,000 houses than there would be in 50 small homes.
I don't know, because you have it as rental, and you're gonna have different people from all walks of
Well,
life.
I don't see the correlation between,
You don't see the correlation between public safety
No, I
and
do
the
see,
impact it's
I
having
do
on
see
the
your
county.
point, but you can't stop David Hayes from building a
I can't
subdivision.
stop anybody, but I'm just saying, all I'm saying is my concerns as a citizen is just that.
Yeah, boy,
I mean, the growth is here.
Everybody from coming.
Hey. Well, no, you can't do that either. I understand that.
Now, as I was trying to say before, a lot of the concerns out here, they're afraid these tiny home subdivisions are going to end up like being a trailer park. They start out being nice, beautiful. And if you don't have the right controls, the right people running and operating.
You ain't seen what I've seen. So there's some super nice, small home developments all across this United States.
Can you, honestly, and I'm not saying this to be a roof, by no means, can you give me an example, one to where I can go take a look at it?
I'll have to email you.
If you can, that'd
I
be
will,
great.
I will. I've got your email.
Yeah.
Have you seen the homes in Kusawati, LJ? I have heard,
I try not to ever go to Kusawati.
I know, well, they're really bad, and it's a lot of,
First time I went down there, I got lost.
How old are these?
they're right next door.
Most of them have been built in the last 5 years.
Okay, right there's what we're getting at. We got to look on down the road 20 years.
Look, the phenomenon hasn't even been, the whole phenomenon hasn't even been around for enough years for you to be satisfied. Okay? These things are high-end developments that draw people with money, and there's no way for them to turn into trailer parks, low-income housing, because they're short-term rentals. People are coming in there and coming out, coming in and coming out, and the developers take care of them.
Okay.
They're not living there. They're not living there. But it's still called small home
You talked
subdivision.
about the last resort. That's probably one of the closest things we've got to a tiny home subdivision in this county is Joe Hooper's last resort, the first cabins he built.
House just sold down there for $600,000.
Not one of the first ones he built.
Oh, it's just been renovated, but it's where Hooper's. I lived on Hooper House. I know the quality that he built. I basically had to rebuild the dang house.
Yeah.
But the problem that we had, and I was privileged to work with Joe Hooper for decades, is that when Joe first started, there was not appropriate long-range thought put into water systems and to sewer systems.
No, I agree.
And so then, when the developer had sold out, and now you've got individuals owning, there was a lot of work that had to go into reformatting water systems.
Right.
And trying to get 12 people who don't really like their neighbors to come together and decide, hey, this is what we're gonna do so that we can all have water. So, having learned from those things, and I'm not talking about the quality of it, I'm just talking about the infrastructure of it. That's one of the things that we have to look at. And I think Keith is exactly correct. We're a community that doesn't have zoning. I don't use the Z word in public very often because I don't want to get lynched. I have been privileged to be the county attorney for about a month over 31 years. Nobody that is, one of the beautiful things in this county is I'll do what I want to on my property within reason, you do what you want to on yours. But because we don't have zoning, we have to make sure that our development ordinances, we didn't have a septic tank ordinance in this county until 1986.
How well I know that because I sell real estate.
But.
And they're all one bedroom less than they're supposed to be.
So what we need to figure out is what is the right, as people discover our area, what do we do that's correct for today and preserves the value for the people that are coming after us?
I agree.
So as Keith said, we don't want something that today is great, but next 20 years from now is a slumlord situation. Keith Marie and I are still trying to figure out one that we've got going that thus far the state hasn't permitted, but otherwise, if it ever does, there's just spending Connex containers off the ground like 190 feet. That is dangerous in so many different ways. I mean, but can you say height can't exceed a certain thing? Well, that's something we're looking at. So it's because we will never have countywide sewer. And not only, and Marie was very right in what she was talking about for the requirements. But you also have to have replacement space. Health department requires that you have replacement space in case your septic tank or your septic lines fail. And I am sure there's some excellent ones, but North Georgia's just beginning to adopt good rules for these communities. And I think that's what we need to do is look around, find some. Marie has pulled some for me. And we did the same thing with RV communities. They have to be a minimum size, so that we're protecting the environment for today, somebody's investment today, but more importantly, somebody's investment in the environment for tomorrow.
And I think there's got to be a reason that so many counties around us, all throughout North Georgia, have come up with their own ordinances. Say, if you're gonna build a house here, it has to be 1,200 square feet. A lot of counties have done that. There's very few counties around that actually let you do a tiny home.
Well, I live just down the hill from Glen on Westview. I bought Gene Crawford's old place, for those of you who remember Gene Crawford. What would stop me from going out and buying some shipping containers, which they have over in Savannah, stacked as high as you can see, dragging them in there, slapping them down on that ground, painting them pink, and say, this is a resort.
Right now, because I've had a lot of phone calls asking about these container homes. And what I usually tell people, I'm just being honest, is trying to scare them off. Because
unless we have a proper set of rules and a set of guidelines, nothing's gonna stop me from going buying a bunch of shipping containers and loading up my land with
okay, what I tell people is that those shipping containers are very strong on the corners when you stack them up. But every time you start cutting out panels for doors and windows, you're weakening that structure. And you have to have a structural engineer to do that.
They could frame it right around that door or window, and that's not a big problem. If you got a welder and some steel, the framing would not be difficult.
True, but you got to get that structural engineer involved. Two, I'm not going to accept any container. I want to see a bill of lading, so I know what's been in that container, so I know that if somebody lives in that, it's not going to contaminate them. There's not something in there that's going to make them sick.
I don't think we're ready to make a final decision. I think we need to fall back and put together a program, go to other counties, see what they're doing, go to other developments, see what they're doing, what works, and moreover, what does not work. And then we'll be prepared to move forward and have a ball.
And this is why we're having this meeting. To try to figure out the pros and the cons and try to come up with a solution to move forward one way or another. And that's,
Well, I don't
this is
think we're
great.
there yet.
I think, no, we're not. We still have some work to do, and that's obvious. But at the same time, it's things like this. It's brainstorming, putting the pros and the cons together and coming up with a solution. And that's, I mean, what better way to do this than have a public hearing? You know, to have both sides of the fence talk for and against it. And then, you know, somebody that was for it might not have thought about this who was against it. Somebody who was against it, well, you know, he's got a point there, you know. So that's how we come up with solutions. You know, that's the way I look at it. So,
But if I put in one down at the bottom of my place, we're gonna have to get the school board to add extra school buses to run down Westview.
I think part of the beauty why people move to the mountains as well, though, is because there is a certain sense of freedom that you don't have in the city, you know. I wouldn't want to build a tiny house in Fulton County, for instance. I've been coming up here camping for years, and now I live here for 2 years, and I bought 4 acres in Mineral Bluff, and I want to build some tiny houses, and now, you know, this may not be happening, so it's disappointing for me.
What would you want to do? I mean, how many houses and Just
Well,
give
so
me an
there are some
idea.
pre-existing structures on the land right now, that I'd like to get rid of, a little single wide and then a double wide at the top of the hill. I would like to build a tiny house, something under 500 square feet. That's something I've been dreaming about doing for 10 years, long before this became as popular as it is right now, and now is my opportunity. I also think that tiny house living just allows you to live on a smaller footprint. It allows, people who don't have $700,000 to spend on a home to still pursue their dreams and achieve them. And, I think it's a legitimate concern to think about the fact that this could go sideways and it could easily turn trashy. But, for me, I don't think that would apply to me, so I think you have to incorporate all kinds and not just kind of comb it over, one way or the other. It helps the middle class people who don't have a lot of money to still pursue house ownership, and, to have a land that they want to build on. So I would like to build a tiny house for myself and maybe a couple of smaller structures on my land, kind of a glamping. You mentioned glamping earlier. I would like those to be dry little cabins, just, cute little bed and stuff inside, and maybe a little kitchen, self-contained, more like a tent, a sturdier tent, and then possibly build a shared shower house, maybe for 2 or 3 tiny cabins aside from my tiny house on the land. That was my goal.
Are these rentals, or you said something about ownership? Or do you want to sell them?
No, just rentals, yes.
All rentals?
Yeah.
But now you would have one for yourself
One,
to live in.
would have a bigger one for myself, and then just a really small one, just enough, like a little bit bigger than a tent. May not even necessarily have electricity, no running water. There would be a shared shower house and bathrooms,
So
maybe.
there again, for yourself, that's not the problem, right? I mean, that's not a.
You can build your
Yeah.
own
Yeah,
tiny house, no
but you can
problem.
only have 2 structures on your 4 acres,
Small.
small homes. yeah.
But you
So
said it had,
aside from
earlier you said it had to be
No, just
200
yours
square
and
feet
one-
per person.
Oh, because you don't have enough acreage for.
Is that 1 bedroom?
Gotcha.
Per,
The whole structure.
But, okay.
Well, I know, but
So you
I'm
need
saying,
an
does it-
individual septic tank and well.
Does the rule
does that
apply?
have a
I mean, how do you know there's 1 person,
that-
2 person, or 3 person living there?
There's no way it's like any other law in the book.
So,
There's no way we can enforce everything there.
so an individual can go buy a piece of property and build a 400 square foot home legally.
Yes.
Okay.
But only 2 people
Yeah,
live in
that-
it.
So that's
Supposedly.
not,
Yeah.
but that, again, that's not the issue here, it's the subdivision.
That's what I was getting at. That was gonna be my next
Subdivision.
question.
Right, subdivision.
And so,
I've got an interesting question. How many square feet are they? Let's say that we have a 400 square foot structure, and it's got 12-foot ceiling. And above the kitchen, we put a little sleeping loft. And above the living room, we put another sleeping loft. And if you measure the perimeter of the building, it's 400 square feet. But there's a whole lot more than 400 square feet of living area possible.
It would depend on that loft, how it was built and designed.
But I mean, that needs to be part of the process.
It's, some of these papers I've actually given the commissioners, and I give to the county attorney. It's what we call Appendix Q out of the International Building Code. And there are guidelines there for all of that.
Well, if there are guidelines and the commission agrees with them, then they ought to be made part of the ordinance. What you can and cannot do.
That'd definitely be for us to look at for sure.
Yeah, this Appendix Q, it tells all about lofts, the steps going up to them, platforms, landings, everything.
Basements,
No, it's not, hadn't talked about a basement under. Now, you can put a basement in there, you're talking about your square footage is getting bigger, because that's another floor.
what's the definition of a subdivision?
anytime the lot's split to 3 or more, that's the definition of a subdivision. We got 3 lot subdivisions up to 150 lot subdivisions.
If you had 75 acres and you divided it up into 25-acre lots, that's a subdivision.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to know what the definition was.
Anytime you got 3 or more lots, it's a subdivision.
All right. Well, anything else before we adjourn?
Thank you.
Hey, I want to thank each of you for coming out. I know it was a nasty day. I've learned a lot this evening myself, and kind of helps us moving forward, and hopefully you'll send me some
Oh, I will.
places for me to look at, and
I've been researching this for a while, for years.
but I appreciate you all coming out, and Commissioner Patterson, anything?
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
It was good.
What's that going on? I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.